We are here today to disclose the truth about a subject that has been ridiculed and questioned, denied for at least 50 years.
Now there are three objects.
Non si può più pensare è vero, non è vero, sono veri o sono falsità, ci si crede o non ci si crede, no. Oramai ci sono varie considerazioni che fanno dire con certezza che l'esistenza di questi esseri c'è, non si può dubitare.
Many of the Indians were accomplished artists, as evidenced by these accurate representations of wildlife, which makes it difficult to explain these pictures. And from all over the western United States, strange figures that bear uncanny resemblances to spacemen. Could these drawings indicate a connection between the Indians of the American West and travelers from other worlds? Of all the Indian petroglyphs, none perhaps is quite so unexplainable as these. No one has been able to decipher them. Los Angeles engineer Charles Ruggles thinks he has discovered the key to the mysterious petroglyphs.
These are scientific drawings. They could be taken right out of a physics textbook. They show sine waves, they show triangle waves, they show square waves, they show electromagnetic circuitry, they show switching, they show almost everything that we could think of in a modern electronics and electromagnetic laboratory. These petroglyphs tell a very intriguing story, and it's very much worth investigating. The Indian folklore tells about two flying objects that collided in space over Death Valley, and one of them fell in Mustard Canyon. The folklore doesn't tell where the other one fell.
One of the most unusual reports in recent years tells of a discovery made near the Coso mountain range in Southern California. They found looked innocent enough, a geode common to that area. Later, after they sawed the rock in half, they felt they had made a unique discovery. That inside was a strange ceramic-like material resembling some electrical device, like a spark plug. How old was it? While the findings have never been verified, the rockhounds claimed that a geologist placed the age of the object at 500,000 years. X-ray results were published, and they were astonishing. The object did not appear to be naturally formed.
Here we are at one of the world's oldest sacred sites, the Osirian Temple at Abydos, Egypt.
There is one very significant piece of information in that temple. It is a very faint but clear and precise drawing. It's not etched into the rock, it's not carved, it's burnt into the atomic structure of the rock in some extraordinary way.
Nassim has decoded the Osirian symbol in 3 dimensions. Since our world is not two-dimensional, it makes sense that codes relaying information about our world also wouldn't be limited to flat designs. His three-dimensional version of the Osirian symbol starts with the vector equilibrium, a perfectly balanced force field with 12 equal energy lines radiating out. They stabilize its center like the 12 spokes of a wheel. The primary pattern of balanced energy flow around this structure is the torus. Here we expand to the next larger scale with a total of 64 pyramids called tetrahedra. If we then put spheres in representing the toroidal energy field surrounding each of the pyramids, and then we drop away the pyramids, we end up with a matrix that is, amazingly, an exact overlay for the Osirian icon. A three-dimensional model of the same pattern that was burned into the rock wall of the Egyptian temple thousands of years ago. I started wondering, is it just a coincidence that the exact same design appears in significant places on two different continents? But then Nassim showed me that this geometry of 64 is encoded time and again in cultures across the centuries and from all over the world. The Hebrew Kabbalistic tree of life creates the same structure we just saw, with the vector equilibrium again embedded at every level. This same pattern shows up in modern scientific research. The double helix has an alphabet of 64 codons that are used to encode our human DNA. I had seen that there was advanced knowledge of the living geometry of the universe thousands of years ago, but how on earth did they know about it?
Most of the stories of ancient Egypt and Mayan and Incas talk about sun gods coming to the earth and teaching them engineering and writing and all of their science. I started to wonder if all these sun gods were not advanced civilization coming from another part of our galaxy. These texts and many ancient cultures describe them as coming in flying boats, or in the Vedic tradition, flying machines, and so on. There is many mention of these sun gods coming through time.
Could these early pilots from beyond our world be the ones responsible for sharing the knowledge of this code? Could they actually be tapping its power to propel themselves through the cosmos?
And when you look at the fact that the most conservative estimates are in the Milky Way galaxy that there are at least 10,000 Earth-like planets that have intelligent life on them, and that at least half of them are likely to be as advanced or more than ours, it's almost a certainty that there's intelligent life out there that have mastered the laws of the universe beyond what's currently taught at MIT and Caltech, to be able to transfer through space-time in real time through vast distances of interstellar space. We have over 4,000 cases where these objects have landed on terra firma and left physical evidence. We have over 3,500 pilot cases. We have hundreds of cases, including ones from the highest ranking investigator at the FAA, John Callahan, and numerous other operators where these objects have been tracked on radar going tens of thousands of miles per hour or dematerializing and then reappearing in the men and women who are on this stage, and the some 350 additional military intelligence witnesses to the so-called UFO matter and extraterrestrial intelligence can prove and will prove that we are not alone.
30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers.
And when I arrived in the summer of 1963, my clearance was upgraded to Cosmic Top Secret, which was then and still is today the highest level of classification in NATO. And when I arrived in the summer of '63, I learned of a study that was underway that had been initiated in 1961. They concluded after this 3-year study that the planet Earth and the human race apparently had been under some kind of survey or observation for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, by several extraterrestrial advanced intelligences.
These vehicles have been seen and confirmed all over the planet.
While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it.
A lot of people talk about conspiracies over a shadow government. I'm willing to testify before Congress that these black operations do exist. I nearly became part of it.
We have contact with aliens not originating from some foreign country, but from some other solar system, and I have been a party to that.
What's your theory behind what's going on here with these sightings?
Documents released via the Freedom of Information Act confirm that these types of incidents have occurred going back to 1948. The documents describe saucer-shaped objects whose capabilities are vastly beyond anything that we have, the Russians have. I think the logical explanation is we're dealing with visitors from somewhere else. Regardless, there are a number of cases now. I've interviewed over 120 former or retired Air Force personnel who've talked about UFO incursions at missile sites, at nuclear weapons storage areas. The incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana in 1967 did involve the appearance of a saucer-shaped object above a nuclear missile launch site. Seconds later, all 10 of these missiles controlled by this site malfunctioned. And the 2 officers involved, including former Captain Bob Salas, who was at the press conference on Monday, by the way, testified that he was sworn to secrecy and told never to discuss this. He kept his silence until 1996. All the gentlemen who appeared with me at the press club believe the American people have a right to know the facts.
Over the last 43 years, I have given more than 700 presentations of an illustrated lecture called Flying Saucers Are Real. It lasts about 90 minutes. I cover 5 large-scale scientific studies that 98% of the people have never heard of. I deal with all aspects of the flying saucer phenomenon. Obviously, I can't do that here today. I can give you my conclusions. The first one, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. Some so-called unidentified flying objects are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about those. Some few people within major governments have known for most of that time that indeed some so-called UFOs are alien spacecraft. Unfortunately, what also comes out of this is that our civilization is not the most advanced in the local galactic neighborhood.
On the morning of May 14, 1988, Amaury Riviera, a young man from Puerto Rico, photographed a giant disc, followed and circled by 2 jet interceptors. What makes the sensational pictures even more interesting is Riviera's claim that he had contact with the occupants of this UFO.
Remember that right after World War II, the Army Air Force was separated and became the Air Force, a separate branch of service, and that the OSS, which was the Office of Special Services, was disbanded and eventually became the CIA. So that here was a major military organization and a major intelligence organization totally in disarray, new-founded, didn't know what they were doing after World War II, and not really reorganized yet. And as a result of that, the President Truman, at that time, convened a very high-level committee to examine this alien or UFO phenomenon. They did come to the conclusion that it was alien, and the military rightly came to the conclusion if they're hostile, there's nothing we can do about it. Therefore, their choice was to deny it and to hush it up and create the National Security Act of 1947, which validated that deception and covered it up and allowed the group to go underground, as it were. And we've been living with that now for 50 years. It is really the beginning of the whole cover-up, the entire denial of this phenomenon, and the addition of dismissal, disinformation, misinformation to cloak and to discourage investigation, to misinform. It's just been continuous for many, many years now. Eventually it came away from the fear, I believe, of not being able to protect and do their duty to the notion of power and control, controlling the knowledge and the technology. And the group involved with that is still doing it.
Denying that we've ever been visited by UFOs?
The RAND Corporation, which is a think tank, did a study for the Air Force in 1968. The Brookings Institution, which is a think tank, did a study for NASA in 1959, I believe, in which they said basically if extraterrestrials are here, governments have nothing to gain and everything to lose by admitting that without knowing the full intentions of whoever might be here. Are they hostile? We don't know. Do they intend some nefarious activities toward humankind? We don't know. So basically, you know, the odds that the U.S. government is going to admit that there are craft flying around American airspace that run rings around our own aircraft, literally, and we hope they're friendly because we can't control them. And oh, by the way, they seem to be interested in our nuclear weapons and seem to be shutting them down from time to time. The government has everything to gain by keeping quiet about that.
I think it's time to open the books on questions that have remained in the dark, on the question of government investigations of UFOs. It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law.
Now, though, the politics of UFOs. Mexican Air Force pilots capturing on videotape what are said to be 11, count them, 11 UFOs, unidentified flying objects. They are officially that. Bright objects, some sharp points of light moving quickly across the sky. The tape called historic by some. Members of the Mexican Defense Department saying it's the first time UFOs have had the backing of any country's armed forces. Now, this now from Washington is Stephen Bassett, founder and executive director of the Extraterrestrial Phenomena Political Action Committee. Last time he was here, he was running for Congress, was unsuccessful in that venture. But I will ask you today, sir, the Mexican government, the Mexican military says, hey, we took these pictures, these are UFOs. What was that, do you know?
This is significant for two reasons, Shepard. One, this is released by the Defense Ministry of Mexico. This is a message being sent to the United States government that Mexico and many other governments are losing patience with our government's intransigence in ending this embargo. Other messages have been sent by France in 1999 with the Cometa report, and by the United Kingdom when they released a substantial number of documents regarding the Bentwaters case in 2000. Many countries know about the extraterrestrial presence, but they deferred to the United States with regard to the timing of when disclosure would take place. But they're simply losing patience.
How do we know this, by the way?
Well, we know it by paying attention. I've been following this now for 10 years. We call it the politics of disclosure, the disclosure process. Hundreds of
Absolutely no question about that. And his number, thousands, is accurate since 1991. Thousands of pictures and videotapes of discs, but never anything like this, taken by such sophisticated cameras on board military vehicles.
Oh, there's been plenty of...
But not as clear and widespread as this, and government confirmed in this way. I'm just saying that these are unusual in that
Oh, no,
way.
it's happened many times before, but this is the first time it's been released. Believe me, there is evidence like this in the archives of every major first world government in the country, but they release this publicly in a news conference in Mexico City. That's the difference.
We're going to talk with a couple guests in a moment about this story. First, though, Richard Hoagland from the EnterpriseMission.com. Richard, what does this all mean?
Well, you know, the drip, drip, drip is becoming a splash, splash, splash. This is obviously planned run-up to disclosure. I mean, there's no other way to account for this. This guy is the Pope's chief astronomer. He is in charge of the Pope's meteorite collection back in Rome. I didn't know the Pope had a meteorite collection.
He must have a good one.
And he's speaking tomorrow at the British Science Festival in Birmingham, but he's just down the street when the Pope coincidentally happens to be in London when he makes this series of major pronouncements in London to, what, brief her on the Vatican's perspectives on extraterrestrials? And you're going to see things coming from our administration. There's a lot of clues that we're getting closer to some kind of official movement this fall. Remember, there's this big conference, the ESA conference going on in Rome beginning next week, where the Phobos data is supposed to finally come out that we've been talking about for months and months and months. So, no, I'm not surprised, and I'm looking forward to what your guests have to say, and all I can say is the big news here is not that the church is saying we would baptize aliens. I mean, give me a break. It's the legitimization of the conversation that aliens exist, George.
What is exceptional is that the Vatican was taking very seriously what science might tell us about the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligent life forms. That's what the conference was about. Just Catholics, Christians in general, they brought 30 of the best scientists, the astrobiologists, of the cosmologists, of the astronomists, to tell the philosophers and the theologians what they already know about the possibility of something that could happen. Now, what they're trying to do is get out of the story, get out ahead and say, what if we were to find life outside of the planet?
The church's teaching then. Well, if you consider for a moment, if you determine that there is extraterrestrial life there.
Well, one thing would be fascinating would be not only extraterrestrial life, but if it were extraterrestrial intelligent life forms. That would definitely make us go back and say, maybe our understanding of perennial truths needs to be updated. Now, the way
Decades ago, visitors from other planets warned us about where we were headed and offered to help. But instead, we, or at least some of us, interpreted their visits as a threat and decided to shoot first and ask questions after. They, the military, must have been and still are so paranoid that they feel it necessary to use the visitors' technology to fight them off, rather than welcome them as partners in development, though they may have seconded a few renegades to assist them in what can best be viewed as diabolical developments. How much has been accomplished in 60 years of feverish activity by some of the most educated minds in the United States? Has America developed flying saucers that are visually indistinguishable from the visitors, as alleged? And if so, what do they propose to do with them?
Of the Avro-car flying saucer for the U.S. Army. Avro is moving ahead on many fronts, and confidence in the future is flying high.
President Clinton was asked a question by White House reporter Sarah McClendon about why he didn't do something about disclosure. And Clinton replied, "Sarah, there's a government inside the government, and I don't control it." Excuse me, doesn't the commander-in-chief and the person who allegedly has their finger on the nuclear trigger have a right to know what his subordinates are doing?
Because of my openness to these things, I did have many of the old-timers in the military and in the intelligence community over the years wanting to get it off their chest before they passed away, allowed me to interview them and talk to them about it. And so my ideas became fairly well solidified in the fact we've been
done that, quote, clearly indicate the likelihood of an extraterrestrial explanation. But there are people sitting out there, I'm hoping there are millions of people watching at the moment, who are saying, this is nutty. Why, why do we even talk about such things?
The polls show otherwise, Shepard. CNN, Time, Reuters polls, last 10 years, consistently, 50% of all Americans believe the extraterrestrial explanation accounts for these sightings. Up to as many as 90% of Americans believe the government is outright lying. The polls are unambiguous. Year after year, the same thing. In fact, if you could talk anonymously to people, even in Congress, probably 50% of members of Congress already convinced that the extraterrestrial presence explains this phenomena. Disclosure is at hand. It is very close, and the American people need to prepare themselves very soon for an announcement from our government that there is, in fact, an extraterrestrial presence engaging this planet and the human race.
All right. Well, there you have it. Very interesting. Thank you. We'll try to find out more about the lights, and the next time there's a congressman around, I'll ask him. Probably not on the camera, but I'll ask him off the camera. So there's something to feed on.
A las 7, a la misma altura. Hay unas nubes ahí, se ve de ver esto. Pero, a ver, busquen eso que viene atrás de nosotros.
¿Ve cómo se ve? Se ve como en dos faros.
Viene como a las 7, 8 de la posición. Lo raro es que trae una punta adelante, un puntito adelante. A ver, ¿qué tenemos? Nada, señor. A ver, permítame, déjale busco. ¿Y nosotros?
Comandante, ¿qué es eso? ¿Qué distancia más o menos lo tenías usted y eso?
Oye, a ver, abusado, eso es como...
Ahí van más, siguen más atrás. Son 10, 11 objetos.
Son muchos objetos.
Afirmativo. Ahí van. Va, uno. Y ahí van los atrás. Siguientes.
¿Qué es eso? Dios mío.
¿Se andan correteando?
¿Qué es eso? A ver, trata de enfocar.
Máximo.
Ok, no dejes que lo dejes atrás.
I say that too.
I think it might be lovely, but is that UFO? Amazing. Holy shit. Oh, is that cool?
You can almost hardly look at it.
We've seen them in Mississippi like this, but never like never like
Whoa!
Many people camped out on the field, awoke in the night and hoped that something would happen, but were then driven away by heavy thunderstorms and the appearance of lights. And then swans flew down and shed their feathers. This means that the picture they used could possibly correspond to the light phenomenon which we observe today.
Right behind me is Britain's largest radio telescope, the Chilbolton Observatory. And here it was that the greatest sensation in the crop circle history was to appear in the fields right in front of the telescope.
On the morning of 14th of August 2001, a formation was discovered which was different from any other previously seen. From the ground it looked like a tangled mess, wisps of crops spread around in no system. However, in the evening, with growing shadows, a picture appeared, unmistakably that of a face. That picture represented a whole new technique, a screen technique, the same that's used for printing a picture on paper. 3 days later, the face was joined by something that looked like a data strip. Rows of counters made out of standing and flattened crop. But soon, an astonishing similarity is discovered. In 1974, the astronomer Carl Sagan composed a message that NASA sent into space from the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. Binary figures which constituted a graphic code presenting key factors about humans and the planet we live on. 27 years later, an identical pattern appears in a crop field right in front of a similar radio telescope. However, on closer inspection, it seemed to show that the code contained some fundamental differences. Sagan's message explained our calculation system, the dominant chemical substances within the elements that create life on Earth, about our DNA code, humans' height and quantity, and that we live on the third planet in our solar system, and lastly, a sketch of our radio telescope. The message received described the same calculation system, but that silicon is most dominant in life forms in contrast to carbon. The drawing also clearly shows a humanoid figure with large head in relation to its body. It's also explained that they have an extra string in their DNA, are approximately 4 feet tall, inhabit the 3rd, 4th and 5th planets in their solar system, and have a population of around 21.3 billion. Underneath, the telescope has been replaced by something more complex. 1 year earlier, a strange crop circle had appeared in the same place. Is this the same illustration as in the sender's code? Is this the correspondence radio telescope? The following year, very nearly on the same day, a new picture appears that gives new force to the alien theory, this time in Crabwood, near the town of Winchester in Hampshire. Once again we see a face, but this time there is an unmistakable resemblance to something extraterrestrial. The picture also contains a print, somewhat similar to that of a CD, with something that appears to be a coded message. This formation also has a new type of design, this time with horizontal line patterns of variable thickness, similar to that of a TV picture. The message on the disc is similar to a spiral band built up of many boxes. But data expert Paul Weige manages to decipher the message. The message is in English and reads as follows: "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing." Many have been surprised by this message. Are there aliens with such faces that we should be aware of? Or is this a picture of the sender? Does this indicate the start of actual close contact with neighbors in the universe?
The gray aliens seem to be just biogenetic robots performing assigned and programmed tasks, but are not in charge nor a race on their own. Greys have a tiny mouth slit, a resemblance of a nose and ears, but there's no suggestion that they use 5 sensory perception, eat, breathe, or use speech like humans do. Communication is done by telepathy.
Okay. Back in 1954, I'll give you a quick overview. There was the created 1954 treaty where Eisenhower signed a pact with the known alien species of the time. There were 3 at the time. And said that we're going to deal in high technology, but you can take a few head of cattle and a few human beings and you can experiment on them. It's unthinkable. It's stuff straight out of the Nazi death camps, and I'm kidding you not, it's plain BS, and it's got to stop. Now, I'm going to tell you something a little bit different about the alien species. The bad news ones, there are 9 races of alien populations that look at a human being as a bag of food. They're not cannibals. They don't eat the flesh and the bones and all that kind of stuff. They use the glandular secretions of animals and human beings as a mixture of the vitamins for their food. They get high off of our adrenal gland substances called adrenal chrome. It's something like cocaine to them.
What you are about to see is a video from 1983 that happened to catch an unforgettable, shocking event.
Early 90s, the mutilations were all the same. The eyes were removed, parts of the jaws were removed, inner ears were removed, tongue, inner throat removed, anal area cored out, sexual organs removed, and some intestinal and respiratory organs also removed. In 1956, we got the first report of a human victim, the same type of mutilation. It was Master Sergeant Lovett, United States Air Force, stationed at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. In all cases that I'm talking about here, the carcasses show no blood. The blood has been drained from the carcass, whether human or cattle. All the sensory organs are missing. And from what is gathered from the autopsies, it's some type of a sucking device that has some sort of a laser tip that makes the hole, cauterizes the wound, and then does whatever it does. The autopsy report keeps mentioning, of course it mentions all the wounds and what's missing, but also it keeps mentioning two words: vital reaction. In 17 sentences in this autopsy report, it mentions the victim has suffered from vital reaction. This guy was alive. Disturbing thought of being butchered alive is very hard to comprehend. The true test of the vital reaction is to remove the skull cap during an autopsy. When the skull cap is removed and the brain is exposed, a vital reaction to a forensic scientist or a doctor, you would see a hematoma on a blood vessel. Not big, just a burst. Okay? This guy's skull was, his brain was covered with them. From front to back, all lobe areas were covered with hematomas. This gentleman was alive. Forte in law enforcement was homicide investigation. So I know what I'm reading. Spending most of my career in law enforcement, I can tell you that through the National Crime Reporting System, which is done by the FBI, every month, every crime that's committed, whether it's stealing somebody's bicycle or committing a murder, is reported by every police department, state, local, federal, in this country. These numbers may sound astounding, but I just checked them before I came here tonight to make sure that they were still up. In 1 year in the United States, there are approximately 250,000 people abducted or missing. In the world, 2.5 to 2.7 million people are abducted or missing. Now, to ease that number back, approximately 95% of these people are found. They are runaway children, which encompasses about 70% of that number. Spousal abuse, the guy that wants to see that the grass is greener on the other side. Murder, ransom, and just outright foolishness. 30,000 of that number every year are never found, ever. No man, woman, child. 30,000 is the number that disappear off the face of the earth every year. I went back to 1990. It's a lot of people, a lot of men, women, and children. Some of the abduction cases that I've read are truly unbelievable, at the same time fascinating. The abduction phenomenon is getting stronger, larger, all the time. There seems to be no let-up. Worldwide, like I said, 2.5 million people a year. What about all the countries that don't report those statistics, like Zambia, Angola, all those third world countries that they don't report anything? So how many more people do we add? I did a statistical check to see on the percentage of change year to year since 1990. High points of abduction were 91, 95, 2001. On average, you get a 1 to 2% increase every year or decrease, one way or the other. In those specific years, you had a 10, 12, and a 14% increase. So now what we need to do is we need to go back and look at the UFO sightings in those areas for those years and see if they increased. It's the only way we can put this together. But like I said, you see one, run.
Dr. David M. Jacobs has been doing research in the UFO abduction field for over 40 years, published several books and has worked with thousands of abductees, mostly using hypnosis techniques to reveal these experiences. He states, "My research is based on more than 42 years of UFO research. In addition, since 1986, I have conducted over 1,000 hypnotic regressions with abductees. I've tried to be as objective and as agenda-free as possible. I have no New Age, spiritual, religious, transformational or transcendent program to promote. I try to stay as close to the evidence as I can. However, there's no possibility that I have avoided error. The majority of evidence for the alien abduction phenomenon is from human memory derived from hypnosis. It is difficult to imagine a weaker form of evidence, but it is evidence and we have a great deal of it. Admitting to the difficulty of researching the abduction phenomena, Jacobs, however, rules out the idea that abductions are just a psychological or imaginary issue. Too many accounts from too many unrelated people tell the same developing stories over and over, which just don't fit into any psychological frame. So how does a typical abduction look like? Jacobs describes it in a nutshell. Abductions are a complex series of events and procedures directed by the abductors to passive or controlled abductees. In a typical or common abduction, humans are taken out of their normal environment by aliens. The people are rendered passive and cannot resist. They are taken aboard a UFO, their clothes are removed and they are made to lie on a table. A series of physical, mental and productive procedures are then administered to the subjects. People's physical bodies are probed and examined, sperm is taken, eggs are harvested. The aliens perform staring procedures during which they gaze into abductees' eyes at a distance of only an inch or two. These mind scan procedures appear to be neurological manipulations which give the aliens the ability to enter into people's minds. After the table procedures, abductees report that they are sometimes taken into other rooms where they are required to have skin-on-skin contact with unusual-looking babies. Abductees say that these babies seem to be crosses between humans and aliens. They call them hybrids. Abductees also see hybrid toddlers, older youth, adolescents and adults. Sometimes abductees report that they are required to perform tasks, that they are tested in some way. They say that machines are brought in to examine them. They sometimes are required to have a form of sexual intercourse with other humans and sometimes with adolescent and adult hybrids. They are returned to their normal environment and within seconds they forget what just happened to them.
Here is the tape. There are 4 black and white pictures. In the top right quadrant, a worker walks right to left through a gate. He disappears here in a flash of light at 11:16 p.m. The tape continued to run normally until almost 2 hours later. Then the victim reappears in a second flash of light, now in a fetal position. Then moments later, now crouching, he vomits, and seconds later, staggers right to left, out of frame.
Jacob says that after all these years of research and putting the pieces together, he can see a picture emerging. It looks like there's a program in the works with a certain goal, and that producing offspring may be one of the objectives behind the abduction phenomenon for the purpose of creating a hybrid race.
In May 2007, this strange creature was found on a farm in Mexico. The farmer drowned it out of fear. Since the end of 2008, researchers have been carrying out tests on the corpse, but the mystery is deepening. The tests showed that the being is not known to exist on Earth. Its body has characteristics of both lizards and humans. It also has a large brain, a sign that it was probably highly intelligent.
As a scientist, I personally have to say that it's probably a species in evolution, or an unknown species.
Es una especie en evolución o una especie desconocida para nosotros.
The DNA testing confirmed this theory. No identifiable genetic material was found, and the results cannot be explained.
We analyze a bone and skin and hair, and then we don't have nothing, and that is a surprise for us. What happened? I don't know.
Farmers also reported seeing a second creature flee the scene.
Quedó embarazada de un supuesto contacto con seres extraterrestres y vea usted lo que ocurrió. Verdaderamente impactó a toda Europa y muy especialmente a Italia. Más es que afino.
Se piensa que es ciencia ficción, una novela, pero el caso de Giovanna es impresionante por la cantidad de pruebas físicas, su testimonio y sobre todo un feto alienígena. Esta es la historia.
Una joven italiana de la región de Cerdeña. Una historia no solo de contacto, sino de abducción. Todo comienza cuando tenía 4 años. Ahora tiene 41 años y habla por primera vez.
Recuerdo que era un disco volador que estaba flotando, de color metálico. No recuerdo cómo llegué adentro de él. Me veo flotando. Alrededor de mí hay 4 criaturas. Yo me veo sin ataduras. Me dicen que no me mueva.
¿Cómo te lo dicen?
Me lo dicen telepáticamente. Me dicen que no me mueva, que no me va a pasar nada, que no me van a hacer nada.
¿Qué es lo que iban a hacer?
Principalmente están en la búsqueda de material biológico, tejido, sangre.
Todo esto sería la clásica historia de rapto, de abducción por parte de estos seres. Pero lo interesante es que existen pruebas de estas visitas nocturnas.
Lo he recordado poco a poco.
¿Lo recuerdas por las marcas que tenías?
Sí, por las marcas que traía. La fosforescencia que salía de su cuerpo, que es una sustancia que estaba en toda su piel, que servía para manipular nuestro cuerpo, que servía como sustancia desinfectante, para que ellos no se contagiaran de nosotros y nosotros de ellos.
Al analizarla en laboratorio encontraron que esta sustancia no era natural. ¿Estos seres este tipo de pruebas con nosotros?
Porque somos una raza biocompatible. Somos la única raza biocompatible. Genéticamente somos la especie que más se acerca a su especie. Estamos ayudando a crear una raza híbrida. Es una raza destinada a la extinción, a menos que nosotros los ayudemos.
Radiológicos donde presenta pruebas de implantes que tienen el cerebro. Se determinó que era un objeto sin poderse calificar.
No tengo ninguna cicatriz donde se aprecie por dónde entró el objeto.
La mandaron a hacerse exámenes y el doctor encontró un ritmo cardíaco parecido a un bebé, pero no se veía el bebé. A Giovanna le fue practicado un aborto en su casa al tener complicaciones con el feto, y lo que encontró el médico fue algo espantoso, un híbrido entre humano y otra raza. Se grabó todo el proceso, las imágenes son fuertes. Se encontró una especie de placenta donde dentro se encontraba el producto, con características humanas. Se observan 2 extremidades superiores y 2 inferiores, el torso, pero la cara parece más a la raza que la está abduciendo.
Un aborto.
Dr. Roger Lear is a surgeon from Southern California who has been performing operations on patients for over 30 years.
So far, 8 surgeries have been performed, and with the 8 surgeries, we have removed 9 objects. The commonality, of course, is that all the individuals are subjects of the alien abduction phenomena.
In 1996, he performed one of the first surgeries to remove an alien implant from the jaw of an alleged abductee.
The gentleman that we did the surgery on for the procedure to remove an object from the left jaw was in private industry, and he had a history of alien abduction.
As with most abductees, the patient was reluctant to come forward or to have his face publicly shown.
There is a certain stigma involved with abductees. They have innate fear about telling somebody about what happened. They may feel that they may lose their job or their career may be in jeopardy, even financial loss. So there are some very practical things involved.
What you are about to see is the actual video of the first implant being removed. We must warn you, this footage is not for the faint of heart. First, the surgeon administers local anesthesia by injection to deaden the area around the implant. Once the surgeon makes his initial incision into the tissue, surgical clamps are applied to keep the wound open. Then, the surgeon deepens the incision, and an X-ray instrument called a fluoroscan is brought in to locate the implant under the skin. Once the implant is located, a probe is inserted, and the implant is finally removed. Dr. Lear described some of the extraordinary findings discovered during this amazing surgery.
There is no portal of entry. There's no evidence how the object got inside the body. Then when we look at the soft tissues that surround the object, we find there is no inflammatory response. This is impossible, because anything that enters the body should have an inflammatory response. And then thirdly, they are surrounded by a large number of nerve proprioceptors which are not anatomically correct.
Once the outer biological membrane was removed, it revealed a triangular-shaped object. This object was housed in yet another gray membrane. Remarkably, this inner membrane could not be cut, even with a surgical scalpel. The implant was then sent to Los Alamos National Laboratory for metallurgic testing. The implants were then sent to New Mexico Tech Laboratory, where a battery of metallurgic tests were performed on the objects.
The theory that they put forth was that these were portions of meteorites. They did not know they were removed from the human body.
Amazingly, the New Mexico Tech Lab report revealed that the elements in the implants were composed of meteorites so rare, only a few had ever been found. At this point, scanning electron microscope analysis was conducted on the implants. The results revealed the implants were manufactured and not naturally occurring meteorites. Amazingly, results showed the implants had been connected to the patient's nerve endings.
The second set of tests following some of the tests that were run at New Mexico was run by University of California at San Diego.
The laboratory results from the University of California at San Diego confirmed the earlier tests. Astonishingly, a portion of the metal analyzed in the implants was extraterrestrial and did not come from Earth.
The individual abductee accounts are far more detailed. Not all are UFO related. Some have to do with underground bases.
Experience working in the government black projects. He carried a level 3 security clearance. He's a former government geologist and engineer in the black projects, underground bases at areas 51, S4, and Los Alamos.
Here we have a transparency of Groom Lake. Groom Lake is where the infamous Area 51, S4, S2, a CIA base, it was originally a bombing range, a nuclear test site. It was later become the most secret base in the United States. It employs over 18,000 workers who work in shifts of 12 hours at a whack. Most of them work in the cover of darkness, like us. We built 9 underground military bases there, each with an average capacity capable of basically a city underground, roughly 4¼ cubic miles hollowed out underground. Area 51 is only one base, one of the 131 bases. Of these 131 bases, I call Area 51 a mega base. It's got more than one base in it. It's Tonopah Test Range, Area 51, S2, S4, Groom Lake, and a host of others. Now, these mega bases are gobbling up our gross national product. Right now we're spending 28% of the gross national product on building underground bases solely. That doesn't count for the defense budget. That doesn't count for the spare parts budget. 66 Secret Service agents, Green Berets, Black Berets, crack troops lost their lives because the government, our United States government, lied, did not tell us anything about the alien threat. There's a war underneath there, and I'm talking dead serious. It's been going on since that time. Since late August of 1979, our military, the Russian military, basically the militaries of the world, have been in constant conflict with the outer space alien. The small gray, the large gray, the reptilians, the whole thing. There are 11 distinct races of aliens. 2 are benevolent. 1 had to leave here in a hurry because their world is under attack, both on the surface as well as underground. There, the Pleiadians. They're familiar. Maybe some of you are familiar with that part of the talk. The overview is about underground mountain bases. All of them should be made public. In future talks, I'll be giving latitudes and longitudes of every single one of these bases. I've already written a manuscript at the publisher as we speak. It's a dynamite book. It lists all the secretive agendas that our government has us believing in right now and why it's so much BS.
Robert Dean has a list of credentials a mile long. He served 4 years from 1963 to 1967 at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers, Europe, the military arm of NATO. He was an intelligence analyst with a cosmic top secret clearance.
Well, Don, it began for me in 1963 when I was assigned to the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers in Europe. I arrived in the summer of '63 and I was assigned to the Operations Division. I was further assigned to what we call SHOC, the War Room, the Supreme Headquarters Operations Center. And at that time I was given a cosmic top secret clearance, which was and still is the highest level of security access that NATO has. When I was assigned to the War Room, I learned that a study had been initiated in 1961, and everybody was talking about it. They were gossiping about it. And the subject was UFOs, and that intrigued me a bit. When that study was concluded in 1964 and it was published, and I was still working in the War Room at that time, I had access to this document. I had a chance to read it. And having been exposed to it, I must tell you honestly that my life has never ever quite been the same. Because I read first-hand reports, verifiable NATO military material that indicated that the UFOs were not only real, but they represented something far beyond anything I had ever imagined before. When the study was concluded in '64, they concluded that there were 4 different groups apparently coming and visiting us. Out of those 4 different groups, one group looked exactly like we do, so much so that they could sit beside you in a restaurant or in an airplane or in a theater, and you'd never know. And that particular point bothered the military guys a lot. The point being that some of these people from somewhere could be walking up and down the corridors of SHAPE headquarters, or they could be walking up and down the corridors of the Pentagon. But that was only part of the story. The SHAPE conclusions in '64 was that there were 4 groups that we knew of, They were apparently interplanetary. Some very likely were interstellar. They even concluded that some of them could be intergalactic. When I retired in 1976, many of our military people knew at that point that we were not simply dealing with visitations from people from other planets or star systems. They had concluded by 76 that some of these visitors very well might be multidimensional in their source. The evidence that we had collected and the evidence that they had repeatedly demonstrated to us, and that's no accident. It became very clear after a time that there was a program or a process of some kind underway, that they had demonstrated over and over and over again that they apparently were able to manipulate matter and time. Now this really shook up our scientists. There are a lot of new young scientists in particle physics today who talk about multiple dimensions. I'm not enough of a physicist to try to explain to you what a dimension is, but the idea that there could be intelligences from somewhere else, from other dimensions coming and going into our reality. It's been quite a shakeup in traditional science. I guess I speak out openly and bluntly about this because I feel so strongly about it. The truth, Don, apparently is simply this, that we're not alone, we've never been alone. We are apparently part of an infinite universe filled with intelligent life. And I think the time has come where we're about to meet our extended family. It's going to be very soon, and the people are not ready. And one of the reasons I do speak out so bluntly and so openly is if in some small way I can help people get prepared for this. Because I believe that this reality, once we have accepted it and understood it and gone beyond the fear, will bring about an expansion of consciousness in the human race that will truly help us and prepare us to go out there and take our rightful place in that infinite community of life.
It is news to many that the United Nations even has an Office for Outer Space Affairs, which is in fact responsible for promoting international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space. Joining me now is author and journalist Nick Pope, who used to run the British government's UFO project at the Ministry of Defence. Thanks so much for joining us. I presume you thought this story was ridiculous from the start.
Well, it's half true, you know. The Royal Society had a discussion meeting earlier this year called The Detection of Extraterrestrial Life and the Consequences for Science and Society. And one of the questions asked was, who speaks for planet Earth? And Dr. Othman simply said, well, look, maybe the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs should have a role in that.
Which would mean her.
It would mean her. So I think what was an intriguing possibility in the mind's eye of the media became a certainty. But scientists are thinking about these sorts of issues. If we pick up a signal, do we reply? If we reply, what should we say?
Who replies?
Well, people are looking for signals using radio telescopes. Yes. If we find one of the big issues, and Stephen Hawking has talked about this recently.
The Cambridge professor.
Absolutely, has said, well, maybe we shouldn't reply at all, because look what happened when the European explorers encountered the Native Americans. Didn't come off too well for the Native Americans. But all these issues now, the scientific community are beginning to think about this, and I think that's interesting.
And is the information, the research coordinated in a way that if a signal did come through, you'd all be discussing it, and you would perhaps put together some sort of response and decide who it would be? Is there any sort of setup or any committee of any kind?
Well, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence have something called the Declaration Protocols, which is really more about verification than anything else. But these issues, these next step issues, should we reply, what should we say? The Royal Society are going to be discussing that at their meeting next week, which I'm going to be attending. Interesting, the Royal Society, when it's discussing this, brings together a multidisciplinary group of physicists, cosmologists, but even theologians, social scientists. People are talking about the religious implications of this even.
Okay, so when the Royal Society does meet and discuss it a bit further, do you think there is a will within the scientific, theological communities, as it were, to have some sort of representative? It would be the UN, wouldn't it?
It probably would have to be the UN. I don't think it could be a political leader. It couldn't be a religious figure. It would have to be someone who could genuinely say, I speak for the people of this planet. And the UN is probably it, which is...
Aliens invading Earth, but now the United Nations is getting ready for a contact with aliens from outer space. This is Moslin Othman. She's out of Malaysia. She will be planet Earth's first interstellar diplomat.
I am so excited to be here at this time in history when we're about to cross the event horizon of our evolutionary development into an era of galactic relationship, when we can rise to our full potential and become the galactic beings that we are.